to use the chat facility. Committee members who are attending remotely are required to leave their camera on throughout the debate and when voting in order to retain the integrity of the decision-making process. If you do need to leave the meeting temporarily, pop a message in the chat function so the Democratic Services Officer is aware, and then let us know when you return. I expect everyone present and participating in this meeting to conduct themselves appropriately and be respectful to each other. That applies to members, officers, and anyone in the public gallery. So agenda item 1 is apologies for absence.
Apology for absence received from Councillor Dilwyn Roberts.
Okay. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Code of Local Government. Members are reminded they must declare the existence and nature of the declared personal interest. Any members like to declare an interest? No. So agenda item 3 is urgent matters. Notice of items which in the matter of the chairman should be considered at the meeting as a matter of urgency pursuant to section 100B brackets 4 of the Local Government Act. So the urgent item that we're looking at today was sent on a report revised draft revenue budget and council tax increase 25-26, which you'll find on pages 2 to 12 of the report. Thank you members for attending at short notice, and special thanks to Amanda for all the work she's had to put in preparing these reports. So you'll be well aware that our proposed budget, including the council tax requirement to comply with our legal requirement to set a balanced budget, was presented to Finance and Resources Committee on the 17th of February. And following on for their recommendation, Cabinet approves the recommendation that would go forward to full council this Thursday. So given the size of the gap that we face in terms of the money coming in and our need to sort of protect our essential services and produce a balanced budget, the original proposal was for a council tax figure of 8.72 to cover council services and an additional 0.68 to cover the North Wales Fire Levy, which, as members know, they set themselves. So the overall figure was 9.4%. So we just move on to the report. We'll go on to 3.2. So we get our provisional budget settlement just before Christmas. Normally, there's not much change by the time you get the final settlement. But on last Thursday, the final settlement was announced. That's attached in Appendix 1. As a deal in 3.3, there's a confirmation that there will be a funding floor. So our funding increased from 3.6 to 3.8. That was already included in our provisional budget statement that we put forward last week. So there's no additional funding there. But there was an additional £30 million for transformation of social services, children's communities, and another £30 million in all Wales by opportunities of £5 million. So as noted in 3.4, of the additional new grant monies, the pathway of care transformation social services can be used to fund some of the pressures that we've built in to our budget, and that therefore reduces the overall resource shortfall. As of yet, we haven't had proper notification of what that money will actually be, but as you'll note in 3.5, Amanda's estimated that based on our normal share, it'll be around £970,000. So as noted in 3.6, one of our budget proposals in order to keep council tax as low as possible was to use one-off monies of £610,000. Now clearly that leaves a further hole in the budget next year. We're also aware since that budget went forward that in terms of NJC pay, that it looks like that pay pressure is going to be higher than we'd anticipated. So we're proposing that that use of the one-off monies is taken out. That leaves a remainder of £360,000 that can be utilised in bringing down our proposed council tax figure combined from 9.4 to 8.95. So that's made up of 8.27 for council services and 0.68 for the North Wales Fire Authority. That is set out in Table 2, members. Now, I appreciate that's not a significant change. I appreciate it'll be very cold comfort to people who are, we know, struggling. We've seen significant rises in utilities, water especially, and use of heating today. But there's a principle here, and I've always said that council tax, these high council tax rates are being used to pay for essential statutory services. So there's a principle here that where we have additional funding, then we should ensure that that is reflected in the level of council tax that we're requesting of our residents to close the gap, members. So that's essentially what's set out here. That is with to be discussed. The recommendation is 2.1 to approve the revised budget proposals set out in table 2, and then to recommend that budget to council for discussion on Thursday. So I'll open it up to discussion. Councillor Gromway. Gromway, just pop your mic on, sorry.
Thank you, Rita, and thank you to yourself and to Amanda for all the hard work that's gone in since we had this announcement last Thursday. I think it's due very much to the hard work you've done in presenting the case for Conway. And we welcome the news that we can further reduce the council tax burden to that 8.95. It may not be a significant amount, but it does every little helps, I believe. So I fully endorse the recommendation that we now look at setting the council tax at around 8.95. Who knows, we might even get some more news before Thursday, but it's unlikely. But certainly I welcome this news. I would second the recommendation.
Okay, Joe Gromway. Members, any other comments or observations? Councillor Paul Quinn.
Be surprised, Charlie, neither will Amanda or Rin, that I disagree with this proposal. Since I was elected in May 2022, each year our expenditure has been greater than our income. I can almost guarantee that in 2025-26, our expenditure will be greater than our income. SIPFA, WLGA has given us clear advice that we need to use the controls and powers that we have to take a grip of our financial situation and make our financial situation more robust. I would have been happier with a much higher council tax increase. Welsh Government's assumption was 10.26. I know across the board, I would have been content with that, but I think even 10.26 would have meant that we would have had significant problems in the subsequent 2 financial years. I would have voted for 9.4 because there's no other option. I'm an independent backbencher. I can't bring a budget to council. But now to make a further reduction in council tax, to me, is just too big a risk. It's too big a risk. It's not acknowledging what everybody's reading in the press. The reports about wage growth, the last month it was 5.9%, inflation up to 3%. We've been told quite clearly that the national insurance costs, we're not going to get the full amount, and we just don't know how that will impact on the fees that some of our providers will be seeking. And we don't know how these additional costs of all our contractors, providers of services, how that's going to impact on us. And I'm like every other councillor. I get a great deal of grief from the level of council tax. People waylay me all the time about it. But I have to stand there and say, yeah, but we're in a very difficult position. And if some things go substantially against us this year, and we all know which some of those things might be, we will be again in a very torrid position. Now, I'm one voice, and I suspect there won't be many other councillors who will stand up and say we need to keep council tax at 9.4%, or in my view, have it even higher. But I think any rational consideration, if we were to have really taken on board what SIPFA and the WLGA were saying to us, I think we've got to do that. I appreciate I may be in a minority of one, but this is a very high risk strategy.
Can I go first? That's okay, Gromley, because it is my portfolio. So to be clear, this is a balanced proposal, Paul. We de-risked the money that was one-off grants from here in recognition that next year will be difficult. As an authority over the last year, we were one of only 2 local authorities who didn't use reserves, and that has made for some really difficult decisions. The council tax rise for residents without the fire was 8.91 2 years ago to 8.76, and that is incredibly hard for people. So there is about finding a balance here. What we're proposing moving forward, whilst people will focus on the council tax rise, because that's what affects them directly, is there's an additional £14 million going into social services. There's an additional £7.7 million going into schools. So whilst it is another high council tax, it doesn't come with the £12 million of cuts that we've had to do over the last couple of years, which I think we'll all accept is really positive. But we just can't keep going, 10.21, 11, 12, where does it stop? So we have to take responsibility to try and drive our budget down next year. We all recognise the risk. There'll be an Amanda's report. We know if there's a storm tomorrow, that could cost us 600k. It's incredibly difficult. But I think on principle, this is a small reduction. I recognise that it's just over 300k. But it does recognise that where we can balance, we will take the bare minimum of residents. And when they see that figure, I don't think they're going to be jumping up and down, but there's a principle for me, and that's why I'm supporting of these proposals. But I completely recognise the risks that faces next year. We don't set pay. There's lots of things out of our control, and that remains incredibly difficult for us. But a balanced budget is a balanced budget. As I say, I don't think that I would get a balanced budget through in the figures that you're actually proposing, because lots of people would want this figure to be far lower, and it's that balance of risk and that balance of opinions that we have to cater for. Gromy, do you want to come in?
On a similar vein, and I totally understand where Paul's coming from, and I'm one that said that we should be increasing the amount that we collect from our ratepayers to what the Welsh Government has set as a guidance. But having said that, I have 2 young sons with small families that have to pay these council tax. I could absorb that probably because of my requirements at my age. I don't need so much money, and I could probably accommodate the extra increase. At the same time, I do realise the suffering that some of our families are out there, especially the ones that are not in the highest paid jobs, that face substantial utility costs going up in the very near future, and it is a struggle for them out there. I think, yes, ideally we need to raise enough to cover the services that we provide, but I think we do need to take a serious look at the services to make sure that we are being as economical as we can in delivering those services. I think that's got to be our challenge over the next 12 months, to try and avoid some of these overspends, is to try and revisit some of the services to see if we can be more efficient than we already are. And we are an extremely efficient authority. There's always room to look for further efficiencies. And I know from my own service how painful that could be, but there are different ways of doing things. And I think we need to look very closely how we do things differently to try and keep the burden as fair as possible to our ratepayers.
Thanks, Gromy. I've got Councillor Carr online.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I visited a food bank in Old Colwyn this morning, and I spoke to people, and I'm seeing how people are struggling. And also, it was announced today about the gas and the electric. The increase is going to be getting on for 7%. I can't really believe that Paul wants us to put council tax up even more. It's incredible. I think there is. I think there are people in this authority that are semi-detached from real people that really just can't afford, particularly the older people, and also families with young children that they're not on sort of brilliant wages. How do these people cope? I mean, we can't sustain these increased council tax year on year on year, because as we all know, council tax is a regressive tax. It's the poorest hardest, and it's really hitting people. So I do object to sort of Councillor Paul actually sort of saying, oh, well, this is going to be sort of something that we have to do. But he needs to go out and meet real people that are having to pay this council tax, having to pay the gas and the electric, the water bills going up massively, everything's going up. How do people cope? So I think we need to be less semi-detached. And I think councillors need to go out in the wards and actually speak to the residents, and rather than listening to the WLGA or IFA or anybody else or the Welsh Government, all people on very high salaries earn an awful lot of money. They talk about painful decisions, but they don't make painful decisions for themselves. So that's my thoughts on it, really. That that councillors should not be sort of wanting larger and larger council tax rises. They've got to listen to the residents. Thank you.
David, any other comments or observations? Paul, I'll bring in. No, I'm not going to have a debate. There'll be a big debate tomorrow. I'll bring in once more.
David, you're quite able to articulate your point of view. I think any councillor will know that I am deeply engaged with some of our most vulnerable residents, and I fully understand that. Of course, significant numbers of our residents don't pay council tax. Also, I suspect I may be the only councillor, but I held a public meeting on the budget last night in Abergele Town Hall. And since I was elected, I've every year held a public meeting on the budget, because I come from that tradition and heritage that believes passionately about engaging with my residents. And yes, I argue the toss with them about all sorts of things, because I think that's how democracy works. I persuade some people, I don't persuade some others. So it's not true, David, that I'm detached from my residents. I get a lot of grief, like lots of councillors, about the level of council tax. But the reality is, if we want quality services, and each year I voted for the council tax, and to be honest, it hasn't been a balanced budget, because as soon as the first quarter information comes through, we're overspending that income that we had. And this year, 24-25 is the same. We will have overspent the income we had. And that will happen again in 2025-26, in my view.
All right, so I feel like we're going to have this discussion in a couple of days, but I think just to be clear for anyone present here, in all areas of our budget, there is no overspend apart from social services, which is demand-led, where there's increased numbers of individuals require our care, and that is incredibly difficult because we legally and morally cannot turn people away, and that is challenging. But I repeat, we have put £14 million into the social care budget in recognition of that, Paul, and that's the essence of setting a balanced budget. But this cabinet recommendation is to move forward for full council on Thursday, and I'm sure that it'll be debated at length, which is only right and proper. If there's no other cabinet members want to speak, we've had a proposal and we've had a seconder. Can we show in favour of the recommendation? Okay, so that's the only order of business. Thank you all again for attending at such notice, and a special to our officers who've worked really hard to bring us to this new report. Members, Jill.